what is evil? A Kabbalistic definition. So what is evil? If I were to ask you what evil, if I were to throw the word at you, evil, what's the first thing that enters your mind? Money. All right. That's not the first thing that entered my mind. But when you were to think about something evil, something frightening, something very dastardly, something very bad, very vicious, someone who's evil, who has no good in him, who's dark and all of wicked. That's what evil is. That's how we understand wicked. That's how we understand evil. We associate evil with someone who's wicked or does something that is very wicked. Correct? Would you perhaps associate evil with someone perhaps who did not put on tefillin, for example, or didn't give charity, doesn't give charity, or doesn't fulfill any other the commandments that we have? Would you associate that with evil? Obviously not. We associate evil with something wicked. Is indeed that the definition, the Torah, Judaism definition of what evil really is? Let us investigate and see. What is the Kabbalistic definition of evil? David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Ohavei Hashem sin'u ra. Those that love Hashem are diametrically opposed to evil. Not only are they diametrically opposed to evil, they hate evil. They detest evil. Do you need to be a lover of Hashem to detest evil? Every human being will detest evil. Every normal person detests evil. No wicked person will not detest evil. Yet King David says, those that love Hashem detest evil. So that already gives me a little bit of an understanding that my definition of evil is not the same as that of King David, that of David HaMelech. Similarly, the Talmud, in trying to identify who we are, what makes us who we are, what defines us, tells us that man is divided into 5 categories. Every human being, every male and female, is divided into 5 categories. Tzaddik v'tovlo, a righteous man. V'tovlo, that is good to him. We'll soon see what the definition of that is. Tzaddik v'ra'lo, a righteous person that has evil. Rasha v'tovlo, a wicked person, an evil person that has good, and Rasha v'ra'lo, and a wicked person that has evil or wickedness. Ubenoni, and the intermediate person. In Sefer Tanya Kadisha, it goes at great length to explain to us that the Benoni, the intermediate person, is not someone who has half sins and half evils. Rather, it is someone that is governed by good impulses and by bad impulses. He has natural tendencies, natural impulses, and he has spiritual and holy impulses, yet he chooses to always do good. In other words, what is the difference between the intermediate person, or that which we call in Hebrew Benoni, and the righteous person? Effectively nothing. There is no difference between them because both of them do everything that is right. The only difference is intrinsically there is a difference. What is the intrinsic difference? The righteous person has no evil impulses whatsoever, no negative impulses whatsoever, no natural physical desires whatsoever. Whereas the Benoni, the intermediate person, has natural tendencies, can have even desires, can have even wicked desires, yet he never plays them out. So he always has those two opinions within him. There's always this inner conflict that exists within him. But he decides always to act upon his good inclination to do that which is right. So that's for another time. That's not for now. Both are great in the eyes of God. Both achieve a great thing. But that's not the topic that we want to concentrate on tonight. What we want to concentrate on tonight is, what is the definition of evil? Now, if our definition of evil is someone that's wicked, someone that's black, someone that's dark, it doesn't seem to be the definition of the Torah, of David HaMelech. It doesn't seem that to be the definition of the Gemara, of which the Gemara says that there is a tzaddik, v'tovlo, a tzaddik, that he only has good. Tzaddik, v'ralo, a tzaddik that has evil. Now, if you're a tzaddik, remember we said before, if you're a Benoni, you never do bad, which means you never enact, you never play out anything bad. You may have a sinister thought, you may have a desire, you may have a temptation, but you never enact it. So what's the difference between him and the righteous person? The righteous person never has those impulses in the first place. So then how can we then say that there is a tzaddik, vera lo, a tzaddik that he has evil or has some bad? Now in the Talmud it means to say that the tzaddik v'tov lo, the tzaddik that has good, means to say he has good in this world. Life to him is good. And the reason why that is because he doesn't need to repent. There's nothing for him to rectify. And therefore he doesn't need to go through suffering in this world in order to rectify anything. He's perfect. Tzaddik veralo, a righteous person that has some bad. What does it mean bad? It means to say he suffers in this world. Why? Because he's not reached the level of the pinnacle of purity. And thus he needs to be purged through suffering. But in Raya Mehemna is a part of the Zohar. And in Raya Mehemna it says that's not the true definition, or the Kabbalistic definition of a righteous person that has wickedness means to say, it means that he has total control over the wickedness, and the wickedness never raises its head at all because he's in total control. He's in total control. No impulses whatsoever. Effectively, what's the difference between him and a tzaddik v'tovlo that only has good? The difference is that to what degree does he repel evil? To what degree does he reject and hate evil? Those who are of the perfect righteous are ones that totally repel evil, they hate it to the greatest degree. In other words, to what degree you are righteous is the degree to what you will repel or reject or hate evil. So both are righteous people. How can that there be? If a person is righteous, then what is the definition of evil then? If the guy is righteous, then what is the definition of evil? We said before, even a Benoni, even the intermediate man, never enacts evil. How much more so the righteous man? As the Talmud says, what is the definition of a righteous man? That he has no evil within him whatsoever. Ki hargo beta'anit, because he totally killed it. As it says, V'libi halal be'kedbi, about King David, he fasted so much. He purged himself of materialism of this world to the extent that he had no longer any evil within him whatsoever, any impulse for negativity whatsoever. Can we then conjure in our minds at all? Is it possible at all to think that a righteous person will even have the slightest thought of what we defined as evil? So obviously that cannot be the definition of evil. What then is evil? We know what good is. Maybe we don't know what good is, but we think we know what good is. But we certainly don't know what evil is. So let us a little bit begin to understand. The Kabbalists teach us that for many reasons, when God created this world, He created what's called Seder Hishtalshelut, an order of descent, which means that God created from the infinite light, he contracted his light to a certain degree, and that brought in to reality a lower level of spirituality, and then there was continual contractions of this light in order for the light to ultimately bring about materialism. That's called the order of descent. Seder ishtalshelut. Like the chain, that one link, the bottom of this link is holding the top of the link below it. Why was this whole complex Kabbalistic scenario put into place? Not because God needs it. God could have created the world in an instance like that. Not that the order of descent takes time, but spiritually it's many varying levels. Surely God could have created the world, the physical world, directly from spirituality in a manner without this order of descent. There are many reasons for that. One simple reason is not that God needs it, we need it. In order to be able to climb up, we cannot reach the highest level without the ladder. So you brought me down and you took away the ladder. I don't have any way to climb. You threw me down. So you threw the soul and you created a physical world and you threw it down, so to speak. Now I have no way to come up. So the order of descent is in order to allow us to ascend. Now, part of this whole spiritual structure that God put into place is what we know as the four worlds. The four worlds is the beginning of creation. Spiritually and lower until it reaches this physical world. There are four worlds, generally. Within each world, there are myriads and myriads of levels. But generally, there are four worlds. And from these four worlds, within these four worlds is contained 10 emanations of God. They are the 10 sfirot, the 10 emanations as we know them. Chokhmah, Binah, Vedat, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, or according to some counts, Keter, crown, knowledge and understanding. And then these 6 emotions, Hesed, Gvura, love, justice, etc., going down until kingship, which refers to the concept of transference to the next level. So without getting too Kabbalistic and too involved in this, every world has different levels and emanations of godliness, and then the lowest point of that world becomes the crown or the energy for the next world, and so on and so forth until it gets to this world. And generally, in general terms, there are 4 worlds corresponding to the 4 letters of God's name. The first world is called the world of emanation, the world of Atzilut. The reason why it's called the world of Atzilut is because it is the world by which there is only pure godliness. Now I want to stop, before I go to discussing these 4 worlds, I want to tell you what the Kabbalists tell us about these 4 worlds, and then we'll discuss them. Let me first tell you what those 4 worlds are. The world of emanation, the world of Atzilut. That's the highest world. That world comes from the infinite light of God. Before the infinite light of God put into place that particular concept, call it world, it's called worlds, but it's a concept, it's a spiritual concept, there had to be contractions as well, even for this level. Because once it's called a world, that means it has an association, albeit subtle and small and minute, to ultimately the physical world that we live in. Then there's the world of Bria, the world of creation. Then there's the world of Yetzirah, formation. And then there's the world of Asiyah, the world of action, this world. Okay? So we see that these 4 worlds correspond to the 4 letters of God's name. And that's very meaningful and significant because the very letters of God's name, the very name of God is Havaya, to bring life, to bring into existence. And therefore each letter then corresponds to a different level of existence that will ultimately culminate in this order of descent in this material physical world. Now, in these four worlds, the Kabbalists tell us a very interesting thing, and really this was the birth, when I was thinking about it, this is the birth of this shiur. It says a very interesting thing. It says that in the world of emanation of Atzilut, there is only good. Only good, no bad, no evil. The next world, the world of creation, it says, that the majority of that world is good with a little bit of evil. We're talking about a spiritual world here. We haven't even reached the physical world yet. We're 2 steps away. Yet already in the Kabbalist's eyes, there is an introduction of a little bit of evil in that world. What is evil doing in a spiritual world? Then there's a world of Yetzirah, of formation, where it says that in that world there is an existence of half evil and half good. Half evil. And in this world, the majority is evil and there is a little bit of good. Okay, now we would like to view this world as pretty decent, no? It's not that evil. There's a lot of evil people in the world, a lot of wicked people, but if you look around, the majority are decent, no? Decent, a bit, could do better a little bit. We definitely could do worse, but we're not that bad. Yet the Kabbalists call this world the majority bad, majority evil, and a little bit of good. Let's go back now to these worlds now. In the world of emanation is such a pure world by which everything in this world or this spiritual level is total attachment to God. To such a degree that in that level or in that world, there cannot exist anything material and anything connected to the material world. There is no creative substance there whatsoever, even spiritual. It is just the divine light as is reflected in 10 different ways. On the lower level, the divine light is also reflected in 10 different ways, but on a much lower scale. Now, the next level, the world of Bria, it says, is the realm or the world of souls, of very high, lofty souls, and the highest of ministering angels. Ministering angels, we are referring to the highest spiritual beings that have a very astute and deep understanding of God, passion for godliness, and deep understanding of godliness. Let's go. And on that world it says the majority is good and some bad, some evil. I ask you, do you see any evil so far in this world? We see the world of souls. There's no materialism. There's no guns, there's no axes, there's no machetes. And certainly not Rocket Man. Love that name. There's no rocket men in that world, in that realm. It's only spiritual entities and souls that are waiting to come down to this world. To be fair, in the world of Atzilut, there are also a realm of souls, but the most highest of souls, very, very few souls are rooted on that level. And certainly not, and we know that the essence of a soul is godliness. Certainly not any type of ministering angels, and I don't want you to conjure ministering angels as some sort of heavenly bodies with wings and something like that. It is a spiritual entity. Spiritual, creative entity. Spiritual, not physical. Doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, and has a very great perception of godliness. Where's the evil in that world? Did you see any evil there? Any hint to evil there? Then we go down another level, another world, of which the order of descent brought into being the next world. And on that world it says that it's a world of lower ministering angels, who their perception of godliness is still high, but not as high as the ones before. It's a bit lower. And on this world it says there is, again, no materialism, no physicality whatsoever. Yet in this world it's called half evil, half good. And then we descend a lower level, in the materialistic world that we exist, where there is physicality and there is nature, and there's a lot of beautiful things that God created in this world. Certainly a lot of good things, yet this world is called majority bad and a little bit of good. How come it's a majority bad? What's going on over here? So therefore our whole definition and understanding of evil, in accordance with the Kabbalistic idea and interpretation and definition, is out the window. Because how can you, if what we define as evil is wicked and dark and underworld, how can such a concept exist in a world of Bria, in a world of ministering angels, spiritual entity, spiritual being, where there is no physicality? How can you even fathom such a thing? You can't. That would be wrong to. So that's not the Kabbalistic definition of evil. So what is the Kabbalistic definition of evil? And when it says evil, in that there is a little bit of evil in the world of Bria and half evil in the world of Yetzirah, what evil is it talking about? So let us understand. What is the definition of evil? Kabbalah calls evil by two other names. Sitra Ahra, the other side. In Aramaic, the other side. And another name it gives it is klipa or klipot, peel or husk. What is the nature of the peel? What does a peel do? It covers and conceals over the fruit. The fruit is on the inside, the peel is on the outside. As attractive as the peel may be, or as ugly as the peel may be, it is just a peel. And it belies what's underneath. You can look at the peel, and not necessarily the peel, what's inside, the fruit inside, looks like what's on the outside. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You ever, what's that fruit with the cactus looking thing?
Durian.
Not durian, I always think of durian. The one with the...
Sabra.
Who?
Sabra? The
Dragon fruit.
No, the one that you open up looks like a grape.
Oh.
Rambutan. Look at rambutan. I mean, if I didn't know it was a fruit, I'd definitely keep away from it. It looks wicked to me. And you bite it, it's very hard. You open it up, nice fruit. Very nice fruit. Jackfruit. Or for that matter, all of the other fruits. The husk, it covers and conceals what's inside. Therefore, according to Kabbalah, what is evil? Something that covers and does not allow you to see what's inside or the truth or what the reality is. It gives you a different sense of reality. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the beginning of understanding of what evil is. A different sense of reality. There is no doubt that the way we look at reality in this world is not the way that God looks at reality in this world. Our perception of reality, even good things, is certainly not the perception of reality of the way the ministering angels and the souls and spirituality and godliness looks at. Therefore, evil is what? Concealment. Concealment of what? Of godliness. Godliness is the essence, the intrinsic reality of everything. The lower down you go, the more what is there? Concealment of godliness. And that is the Kabbalistic definition of evil. Concealment of godliness, where the perception of reality is not 100%, is not so clear. It's like someone who's got cataract, slight cataracts. You got slight cataracts. Your vision is blurred a little bit. If the cataract is more, you see less. And all of a sudden, your perception is totally different. So, what before you would have seen as a human being, now with the cataract, you see a tree. And the more cataract or the more concealment and the more layers, the more covering, the more peels there are on your eye, what do you end up seeing? A totally different perception. You see a monster in front of you. Take away those peels, there's no monster, it's just your wife. That's all it was. It was nothing threatening. It was nothing bad. It was nothing damaging. Just your wife standing in front of you. But because you got these peels, these layers on top of you, you're not seeing perception right. And you think that there's a big, massive thing in front of you. You're not seeing right. That is the definition of evil, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take this a step further. Which means, in the highest world, the world of emanation, the world of Atzilut, which is associated with the highest letter of the 4 letters of God's name, which indicates to us that on that level or on that world there is the greatest revelation of godliness. Is physicality a reality or spirituality a reality in that realm, in that world? Only spirituality. The divine energy that created and infused it with life and brought it into existence, is it hidden or revealed according to what we just learned? It's revealed. Therefore, in your opinion, is there any sense of self, ego, creation, any self-identity of an existence other than God? None whatsoever. Therefore, in this world, there is no even spiritual entities. There's only godliness. And that godliness is reflected in 10 emanations. But they are not separate entity to God, as it says in Tikkunei Zohar. Tikkunei Zohar speaks about this level of Atzilut, and it says, Ihi v'hayoi had, He, the Almighty God, and His life source, His energy, His light is one. Ihu v'garmoi had, Him and His causation is one. What is His causation? It refers to the 10 emanations in the world of Atzilut. In this higher world, everything, the oneness of God is very revealed. And when the oneness of God is revealed, is there any other identity? Can there be any other identity? If the light is on, can there be darkness when the light is on? No. Which means that the perception as things are in this world is that I exist. Correct? I feel my existence. I know my existence. I have autonomy seemingly. I can do what I want, go where I want. But is that the true reality? No. I've used as an example before the situation of something that has weight. Now this paper, let's say, had some sort of knowledge or wisdom, and it was brought into, or was born here, and it can't see my hand because its eyes are here. What does it think? That it could fly or float, correct? Correct? That's what it would think. Naturally. Oh, I can fly, float, naturally. And I float, that's my part of my existence. I am a floating entity. Is that the reality? No, because what's behind it? That it doesn't see what's concealed and covered from it? Right? That something is holding it. what is the nature of weight? To drop. Correct? If I am to change its nature, then the energy that changes its nature must be constant and continual. Correct? Okay. Am I a separate entity from God? Do I exist separately from God? Absolutely not. The unity of God is such that nothing exists outside of godliness. And we discussed this in our previous lectures. Nothing is outside of God. When we say God is one, we mean to say that there is only God. As it says in the Torah, En od milvado, there is nothing but God. Thus, the divine energy reveals itself in different levels, and those levels are concealed and concealed further and further and further until it gets to this physical world. And when it gets to this physical world, physicality is created. And by very definition, physicality is in opposition to spirituality. Spirituality is thus revealed or concealed. It is concealed. The physical dimension is revealed, and thus I feel my entity. But that's not true reality. Just like this paper thinks that it floats. That's not the reality. This paper, the reality is this paper needs my energy behind it every single split second. If that energy is left, if I leave that energy for 1 second, there's no independence here. We're not independent beings. God, for the purposes of free choice, allows us to think that. In other words, he conceals himself. Therefore, evil by definition is the level of concealment. How much concealment is there? Is what the Kabbalists define, how much evil is there? And the highest level, there is no concealment whatsoever of godliness. That is why there is no separate entity or existence on that world. It's only godliness. As Eliyahu Navi says in Tikkunei Zohar, in the introduction to Tikkunei Zohar and the Kabbalistic work, he writes that on that level, him and his light, him and his causation, in other words, what comes forth on that level are one. What does it mean one? It means absolutely one. There's no division. There's no seeming separate entities. There is no separate entities in this world as well, as far as God is concerned. But as far as I'm concerned, it seems to be that case. Because I have autonomy, I feel that I have autonomy, I'm not nullified before God, and I have to struggle, toil, and work hard to nullify myself before God, to nullify my will before God. It doesn't come automatic. But in the high worlds, it's automatic, because there is no other existence. There is no other revelation but the revelation of godliness. Thus, all entities there is no entity but godliness. They only feel godliness, they don't feel themselves. Therefore, in each world, it's a matter of how much they feel themselves. And that is directly correlated to the level of how much concealment or revelation of godliness there is. The more godliness, the less sense of self. The highest level, where is the apex of revelation of godliness, there is no sense of self. Even though we do call it a world, so it's something spiritual. It's a beginning of the manifestation of the concept of worlds, even though it's in theory, not in reality yet. But because the revelation is so great, there's no darkness whatsoever. There is no sense of self on that level. The entities that are created on that level are totally aware of godliness and have no awareness of self. Thus, they are totally nullified before God. They are absolutely one with God. Therefore, there is no other side. There is no other entity. There is no sense of self, however minute or great. Are you with me? Okay. Let's go down a step lower. The world of Bria. On that level, the Kabbalist tells us that it is a little bit bad, but majority good. What does that mean? According to the principles that we've learned now, majority of revelation of godliness, but some concealment. Thank you. That's the word. Concealment. And if there's some concealment, then what is there? The perception of reality is not absolute. What is the reality? That there's only God. Correct? That is the reality. Anything outside of that is wrong, is not true, is not truth. Our existence is not truth. The fact that this piece of paper thinks, if it had a mind, that it floats, it's not the reality. Because it can't see, doesn't see the reality because it's concealed, it's hidden from it. Certainly when it has no intelligence or minimal intelligence. Our spiritual intelligence are not as high as those in the higher world, and that in the higher world than that. And therefore we look at materialism as a separate autonomous existence from godliness. We got to ponder and understand and think that that's not the case. But it doesn't come naturally to us. Physicality comes naturally to me. My own ego comes naturally to me. My desire comes naturally. What I want to do comes naturally to me. God's desire, I've got to work on that. God's will, I've got to work on that. God's existence, I've got to work and ponder and think about that. It takes me 2 hours in my prayers to be able to conjure a little bit of that. To cut a slice of that. It takes me a lifetime to nullify myself before God. So on the second level, there is some concealment. If there is some concealment, then there is some sense of self. Some sense of self. And therefore, if there is some sense of self, it's not total godliness. It's not a total awareness of godliness. Is the perception diminished somewhat? On that world, is there a bit of spiritual cataract? Yes. Is there a little bit of another side? Yes. Is there a little bit of a shell or a peel? Yes. Not very thick, but yes. On that level, the Kabbalists teach us it is a level of bitul hayesh. It's a nullification of ego. It is a nullification of self, which means that there is some slightest awareness of self, but you know your source, you understand that you have a source, and you feel that source so great that there is no expression of self. You just know and are aware that there is a self, but that self is more acutely aware of its source and thus nullified to its source. And thus the nullification is great on that level, and thus the entities that exist on that level are spiritual in nature. High-level souls, high-level ministering angels. What defines this level different from the higher level? The level of revelation and the level of concealment. The level of peel and the level of then another entity or another side. In other words, the Kabbalists teach us that what is impurity, what is evil? Another side, or at least a perception of another side. What does it mean when there is another side? That means to say that there's no total nullification before God. Let's go down another level. Then we have the level of Yetzirah, the world of formation. On this level, it says, the Kabbalists teach us, half good, half bad. I was thinking to myself when I learned that, when I was reviewing that, I learned it many times, but I reviewed it and I thought to myself, half bad? That's a great world to live in. That's a world of ministering angels, albeit a lower level, but ministering angels that are aware of God's presence, that are to a great degree nullified before God's presence. We call it half evil and half good. What is then the definition of evil then? Anything that is distant or feels distinct or separate from God. And since their perception of godliness is diminished and the perception of self is heightened, they have a greater awareness of self, albeit they are nullified before God, but not as great as before. Things are not as clear as the higher level. The level of nullification before God is less. And then we get to this world. What happens in this world? This world is a world, the majority bad, evil. It's not because everyone's walking around, or the majority are walking around with hacksaws and machetes ready to cut people in pieces. That's not the definition of evil. The definition of evil according to Kabbalah is appeal, which means that there is a great level of concealment, which means what is the predominant ingredient that I feel in this world? Godliness or me? Me. Therefore, there is much more feeling of the other side than godliness is there not. And I have to work much harder for that perception. The layers that cover and conceal my perception are great indeed. And I've got to work hard to peel them and to take them off. Just incidentally, you should know that the Kabbalists teach us that a fruit that has no peel is rooted on a higher source. A fruit that has a peel is rooted in a lower source, comes from a lower world. Spiritually, how everything translates, everything down below has a spiritual root. Therefore, a fruit that has no peel, that can be eaten just like that, is on a higher comes from a higher spiritual level, because it has less peel. So too with us. The less peel that we have, the more spiritual that we are. The more spiritual that we are, the less darkness there is. The less darkness, the less other side. The less peel, the more revelation, the more spiritual awareness. The less sense of self, the more nullification before God's will. Therefore, to redefine this whole concept, level of evil or level of good is dependent upon our level of nullification before God. Our level of nullification before God is absolutely dependent upon our awareness of self, as opposed to the awareness of the essence and core of life and existence, godliness. That is the reality. Nothing can exist without godliness. No matter what we see, the fact that this paper, if it had any intelligence, doesn't see my hand, it doesn't change the reality. Pretend that this is a human being, and we're looking at each other, and all of a sudden this human being is facing this way, or was born this way. It doesn't change the fact that I am 2 centimeters away from him. Because he doesn't see me, doesn't change the fact that I'm 2 centimeters away from him. I am very close to him, much closer than what he can even imagine. You're not this far. You're this close. But we don't realize that because there is a level of concealment. We're turned around. Because of the level of perception is minimized. Because the concealment is so great, I feel more self rather than feeling godliness or spirituality or my source. In fact, it's almost that I can even deny that there is a source in the first place. That's why on the level of creation, not emanation, on the level of creation, which culminates in this world, it's called no longer the order of descent. It's called Yesh Mi'ayin. From the world of Bria, from the world of creation onwards, is called Yesh Mi'ayin. No longer Seder Ishtalshalut, no longer the order of descent. Cause and effect. It's not Ilah ve'alul. It's not cause and effect anymore. Because cause and effect means that there is an interwoven relationship between one level, the lower level, and the higher level, and it feels it because it's kissing and touching it. Here's the chain. The chain is kissing and touching the higher level. But when we come to the realms and the levels of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, creation, formation, and the world of action, that is the Kabbalists called it Yesh Mi'ayin. Something from nothing. Why is it called something from nothing? Because we're beginning to feel a bit of entity, a bit of a something, a bit of a me. The more me, the less godliness. And we call it from nothing, not because it's nothing, because we cannot relate to it. But on the lowest level, we call it nothing because we can actually, God forbid, be at such a level of concealment or the other side from godliness, or so not nullified before godliness that we only feel our existence and it's as if only I exist. I don't bother to think that there is a God. In fact, I can even deny that there is a God. That's how deep the concealment is. And that will define on what level of other side I'm on, or what level of peel I'm holding. How deep and how great and how thick that peel that conceals the truth in my life. And a lot of it is dependent upon my will and my desire to seek out spirituality, or the lack of, or my desire for materialism, or the lack of. So therefore, evil is not a machete or a machine gun. Evil is the level of nullification before God. Awareness that God is the true existence and the lifeline of my existence, and that I'm totally and absolutely dependent upon God for every single second from my existence. I'm not an autonomous. My finger may feel a separate entity, but if it's cut off, what happens to it? It shrivels and dies. It's alive only because it's connected to my body. And in my body runs energy, runs blood, runs oxygen, runs whatever it needs to run. But my finger, even though it looks separate, if you wouldn't see my body at all, if you just see finger, just a finger, you'd think it's a separate entity, wouldn't you? You know, it's like you know, you play peekaboo with your children. You stick your head or you stick your hand. So what do you see? You only see the hand, right? Now, if you were born like that and you only see the hand, you think there's only the hand. But the hand is connected to the rest of the body. And the truth is, no matter what I see, no matter what my perception is, my hand is connected to my body. And my body does exactly my bidding without any delay. That's the truth of our relationship with God. Except for the purposes of why God created the world, that God wants to be revealed in this world, we need to have free choice. This is something that we've discussed before, and we don't have the time to discuss now, the purpose of creation and why God created the world this way. But there has to be concealment, for there to be free choice, for us to bring the spark of godliness even in the most darkest of corners of this world. We do it, we must achieve it on our own. Cannot happen automatically like in higher worlds. There's no point to the higher worlds. The point and the Torah was given in this world, because God wants to be revealed even in the darkest corner of this world. So that is the definition of evil. The definition of evil is to what degree there is revelation of godliness or concealment of godliness. And that's why the Kabbalists call it by two names, the other side. On which side are you on? Are you on the side of holiness, revelation, or are you on the other side? And that's why they also call it peel or husks. Level of concealment. The more concealment, the more I think that I exist independently. The more I feel myself, the less I feel godliness. Now let us take this to the level of tzaddik. Remember, we spoke about a tzaddik that has ra'lo. What does it mean, ra'lo? How can a tzaddik, by definition, have any ra, any evil whatsoever? The difference between a tzaddik v'tovlo and a tzaddik v'ra'lo, a tzaddik that is good to him, v'ra'lo, it's the level of nullification before God, or the level of revelation that he feels and he is aware of, his level of perception of godliness. So he's an absolute righteous person. He doesn't have any tendencies of evil whatsoever, doesn't have any impulses for desires or physical pleasures whatsoever. That's not the definition. It's not the definition that he's very righteous, he always does the right thing, but he's got some little niggling, little negative thing in there. No. That's not what it is. It's his level of spiritual perception. It's his level of nullification before God. If the nullification before God is total, then it's called a tzaddik v'tovlo. If his nullification is not total, And there are many myriads of levels to what degree of tzaddik you are. You may be on the level of tzaddikim. If it's not total, then there is some level of evil. And remember, the definition of evil is not that he has an impulse to kill, but it never surfaces. It only surfaces in the subconscious. Only a psychiatrist, if it puts him under hypnosis, will he then be able to reveal it. None of that. It means that his level and perception of spirituality is just that notch less than the other tzaddik, than the tzaddik v'tovlo that is absolute, total good to him. Or his level of nullification is just that tiny drop, less in myriad levels. That's why it's called the other side. Are you on spirituality? Thus, less self-perception, more nullification of God. You feel your source more. Or do you feel I am an entity, mi'ayin from nothing, yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing, ex nihilo, something from nothing. Meaning to say that I don't even give it much thought. Or I can even be worse than that, not only that I don't give it much thought, I even deny that there is a source to me. Like the flying paper that is totally dependent upon me but doesn't realize it. And that is the struggle of humanity. And this is the perception of evil. Once there is concealment, then there is more of a sense of self, more of a sense of ego, more of a sense of what I want. And then that could extend to myriad degrees. It could extend to simply being in my room and wanting to do what I want and what I care, and I don't care anything about spirituality, and I'll eat non-kosher if I want to, and I'll eat this if I don't, and I'll do that if I want to or I don't want to, etc., etc., etc. That is evil. And then there is varying degrees of evil. You would never call that person evil. A good person who's kind and smiles at everybody, but doesn't want to put on tefillin. He's just a nice person. He's a nice person. Why would I ever call him evil or on the side of evil? You're on the side of evil. You bad boy, you didn't put on tefillin. You're on the side of evil. You never call such a person. But that is the reality. Because he's kind and he's good, that's a natural expression of himself. But again, it's myself. Now, some people are not born so nice or so kind. And I'm angry and aggressive person. I'm no different to the guy who expresses his own natural characteristic traits. His natural characteristic of self is kind and this and that, but no level of transcendence, no level of beyond myself. Oh no, I don't want to do anything spiritual. I don't know anything about spirituality or godliness, none of that. And then this person's aggressive. Oh, he's evil, he's wicked. No difference between them. I'm not talking in regards to relation to the outer world. The outer world's a big difference. This one's damaging, this one's not. I'm talking in regards to what defines me. This one is not spiritual, and this one is not spiritual. This one in his way, this one in this way. Both of them are not nullified before God. Both of them have a sense of self, a very strong sense of self. And then it can get worse and worse. The greater the concealment, the more sinister perhaps that concealment can lead to. Then selfishness, then greed. That's why the Torah has to step in and say, don't covet, don't steal, don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't commit idolatry, etc., etc. And then it gets me thinking, hang on, I can commit adultery. How can I? And why? Why does the Torah need to tell me not to commit adultery or murder, this and that? I don't think that I'm a person who would ever think to murder someone. Guess what? The more peel, the more husk, the more concealment, the more ego, you never know. Professor, or doctor, rabbi, doctor, whichever order you want to do it. Usually they write rabbi, doctor. Abraham Tversky writes a very beautiful thing. He's a professor of psychiatry. And when he was studying psychiatry, he said that they had to do, I forgot what it's called now, a self-analyzing oneself. What do they call it? When you...
Analysis.
No.
Self-assessment.
No, that's not what it is. I forgot what it is. When you take someone and you do a particular type of test, I forgot what you call it. Anyway, I forgot what it's called now. So you have to do a... what is it?
Self-evaluation?
No.
What do you have to do?
In psychiatry, it's a term in psychiatry where you make an assessment of someone, when you evaluate someone. I forgot what it's called. So part of the lesson was that everybody had to psychoanalysis. You had to psychoanalyze. When you have a patient, you psychoanalyze them. In order to be successful in psychoanalyzing someone else, part of the class was to psychoanalyze yourself. You have to psychoanalyze yourself. Because if you know how to psychoanalyze yourself, you can psychoanalyze someone else. So when it came to Rabbi Twersky's turn to psychoanalyze, he gave a blank piece of paper. I said, "What's this?" "I don't need to psychoanalyze myself." He said, "Why?" He says, "Because if the Bible says, I shall not kill, I shall not steal, I shall not this, I shall not that, that means to say, somewhere within me lies the potential to all of them. So I have all of the weaknesses in the world depending on my level of ego or awareness of self or desire or my will, how much of ego there is. The more ego, the more I could lead myself to all of them. And that's why the Bible tells me not to do this, not to do this, not to do this, to stop and to think, God, am I really capable of that? Depends on which level of self-awareness you are. And thus, which level of concealment of godliness there is. The more concealment and the more concealment, and the more we allow for concealment of godliness in the world, and who knows how far it can go. So evil doesn't start with a machete. It starts with a level of concealment of godliness and the sense of self. The more sense of self, the more ego, the more what the Kabbalists call this evil. Simply concealment of godliness and self-awareness, self-absorption, and you're so self-absorbed within yourself, and no nullification for God, no revelation of godliness in your life, or minimal, or a bit more, or a bit less. And again, that's why the Kabbalists call it the other side. Evil is the other side. Evil is the husk or the peel. I want to read out to you from the book of Havot al-Vavot, and with that I will conclude. A very interesting book of ethics, written hundreds of years ago by a great Spanish scholar. And he writes as follows. He says that in Shara Avodah, in the gateways, in the gates to the service Elohim of the service of God, chapter 4, and he writes like this. The Torah divides man into three categories, or the actions of man into three categories. Commandments of God, negative actions that we are not permitted to do, should keep away from, and things that are permissible. Three categories. That's permissible. You're allowed to eat. As long as it's kosher, you're allowed to eat. You can eat as much as you want. You can drink as much as you want. As long as it's kosher. You're allowed to sleep as much as you want. As long as you fulfill your obligations, put on tefillin, pray, sustain your family, whatever it is that you need to do, study Torah. You're allowed to sleep. You're allowed to enjoy this world and all of these different types of things within certain parameters. And there are commandments that you're supposed to do and commandments that you're not supposed to do. Prohibitions. But he says the truth is, the actions of man must always be seen by man himself as divided into two. Things that you should do and things that you should not do. There is no middle path. There is no things that is in the middle. It either falls under the category of the divine or falls under the category of prohibited. If it's prohibited, you must keep away. If it's permitted, you must turn it into divine. You must turn it into a divine action. Because otherwise there is either this side or that side. There is no in between. And that is a very profound thought. And therefore he says there is no middle ground. For a Jew, there is no middle ground. It is either holy or unholy. And this is exactly how we started off. And that is his definition of Chavot Al-Vavot, and many, many works, as well as the Kabbalists of what the definition of evil really is. We'll stop here. Okay. You turn this off. Any questions?
Yes. Rabbi, while you were talking,